All right, hey, Scott Schrader here with,
Crashlet Collier.
and we're gonna start off as always. We're gonna start off with recruiting because there was a pretty impressive visitor list last week for the Iowa game. Most of them were commits, but again, we always talk about this. It's important to get these commits on campus as often as they can. And Chad Bowden and his staff did a phenomenal job getting most of these guys that were the committed players that were at USC for the Iowa game had been to USC probably six plus times. And Luke Wafel that showed up for his third visit of the year, and he was probably only one that hadn't been to USC, at least five times. So the guys out of state were Elbert Rockhill and Jamian Winfield were two of the kind of the headliners from out of state, along with Cannon Smith from Valor Christian in Colorado, Sean Alston from Harvey High School in Cleveland area. So it was hell of a turnout. Talano Ely was supposed to be there, but he got sick. And so he was not there. But they also had some key 2027 and a few of the really, really younger guys, class of 2028 prospects. And Caden Henderson, a linebacker from Tampa Jesuit, he's USC's top linebacker prospect. He and Brayton Feaster from Akron, Ohio. Brayton Feaster is Elbert Hill's teammate at Archbishop Hoban High School in Akron. And one of the guys that we talked to also afterwards, Jaden Upshaw, a top 100 ranked 2027 receiver from Lee County High School in Georgia. He was really impressed with what he saw from the Trojans and specifically from Makai Lemon. And he just said he had not seen anybody that had a performance that maybe was as impactful as Makai Lemon has, and what he's done on the season has really caught receivers' attention. Obviously, you can't teach what Makai Lemon does, but it's always good for a program when the recruits are watching receivers like him and Jacoby Lane catching passes. And so we also quarterback. I should mention Donovan Warren from Bel Air, Texas. I'm going to mention him because he's a great kid, talented kid. Doesn't have an offer from USC, but he loves the Trojans, and I know if he got an offer, it'd probably be hard to turn him down. So anyway, we're done with the recruiting part. Nobody's going to be visiting this week because the Trojans are up in Eugene, Oregon. The UCLA week is going to be huge for recruiting, especially if the Trojans can knock off the Ducks this weekend and continue their plight for the playoffs. But anyway, let's talk about the Iowa game. You and I were sitting there going back and forth about the weather part and how concerning it was maybe on Friday night. Just give me your thoughts on the weather aspect and overall what you saw from the Trojans in this football game.
Well, I think well, Scott, for me, the weather aspect was not phasing me. I was going in that game. I was going to tailgate regardless. My shoes
Yes.
got a little destroyed, but it is what it is. I was completely soaked just from the tailgates. And I just think one of my friends is like, hopefully the caution tape keeps you covered and all that. I'm like,
Just wrap yourself in it, right?
I guess I send her a selfie of myself, and I'm just like, you be the judge.
Yeah.
So that gives you kind of the idea of how people are thinking about it. I mean, if you were just checking SeatGeek or any of those ticket sites, or just regardless of how you're obtaining your tickets, you probably saw just the markets were going way down, especially as people were thinking, yeah, I might just watch this one on my couch. So you get a general idea of that. But I think for the people who did go, they were bought in. I mean, I think you just saw that even just with how they had to accommodate. They couldn't have the band on the field, couldn't do all
Mhm.
the usual bells and whistles from the team runs out. They still made it look good when they just had them come out out of that smoke from the tunnel. It's impressed they still got the fireworks off, but really once as the game was starting, it kind of actually stopped raining, which was kind of nice. Yeah, it picked up again near the end, but you just saw really a bunch of enthusiasm from the fans who were there. And I mean, hell, I don't think we can talk about this game with at least once mentioning the shirtless dude section, Scott. Yes,
It's
people,
big.
the shirtless dude mania has officially hit USC. So yeah, those are kind
We
of
all
like
noticed it, even us from the press box. I mean, it was impossible not to know what was going on and the vibe that was coming from that part of the stadium too. It was impressive.
for sure. There was a guy sitting about a row in front of me on the 20 yard line, that area where I usually am, who was just like, dude, I gotta go join this. He was getting full FOMO. So you
Yeah.
get the idea of just how it was drawing people there. Just really, I guess, kind of creating an interesting wave of enthusiasm among the fans. And I think definitely on a game, especially from when you talk about from a recruiting perspective, just in a game where it wasn't as occupied as anyone was hoping, I think recruits did at least have to notice the energy and passion coming from the fans who were in attendance on Saturday.
Yeah, the recruits knew what was going on with the rain. And look, it's not like you're traveling to a game, in a place like Athens, Georgia. You're talking about all these freeways converging, and all it takes is one accident on a freeway. And it was all the hype with the news and the weather, and maybe we were even part of the problem, just kind of talking about, oh my God, there's going to be 2 to 3 inches of rain on Saturday, all the flooding and the traffic. So, you talked about people were telling you, your brother didn't go to the game and he's a student at USC, and you're talking about Iowa fans. There was somebody on our site that bought 2 tickets in section 5 at the Coliseum for $70 for 2 tickets total, and a couple of shots were added in. So even Iowa fans were thinking, maybe this is a bit too much for us. But overall, the football part, yeah, that first half, it was 21 to, was it 21 to 10? I'm forget if it was 21 to 10 or 13, but I think it was 21 to 10, right?
21-10, yes.
Yeah, and USC looked like garbage, right? And they were having a hard time. Iowa came out and started throwing the ball. It just kind of seemed like they were playing pitch and catch for a stretch there. But USC got their act together in the second half. And just what did you see from that football team in that second half that maybe gives you hope heading into another, really rough weekend in Eugene, Oregon?
So what really got me excited about that second was just how they just came out playing. They were kind of playing like their season was on the line. I thought they made a lot of great halftime adjustments in the locker room about how they're going to play, how they're really going to suffer offensively, just how they were going to, take advantage of. Well, definitely running is important in the Big Ten. That's kind of just what the Big Ten, what big boy football is kind of known for. I like that USC was taking advantage of utilizing, especially Mekhi Lemon, who I thought had one of the best games he's had in a while. Jade Mayava, even if his numbers weren't the prettiest, the number that I think was the most important was 0 interceptions.
Mm.
That's something I've been wanting to see out of him for a while now. Obviously, I do get the schedule's getting tougher, so that naturally everyone's numbers are going to come down. But at the same time, it was great to see just how well they just played considering the opponent. And then defensively, I really liked how they just brought the pressure to Mark Gronowski and the Hawkeyes offense, especially when you think about just, yeah, Iowa mainly runs the ball, tries to slow the game down. And then occasionally they'll throw a deep ball. They came out and what was it? Played 2, 3, 4, like four, something like that, where they just threw a deep ball early and caught USC off guard.
Yeah.
Not kind of later. Like I kind of knew they'd go there, but I didn't think they'd go that early in a drive. And then not to mention Growski threw a touchdown, ran it for a touchdown, and then also caught a touchdown. So
Yes.
just the fact that they were able to turn it around, I think, speaks volumes to that. But the one thing that does have me concerned about this upcoming game against Oregon is I don't think you can get away with having such a poor first half start like we've seen USC have in these last 3 games. You got to come out swinging. You got to come out and you got to be going blow for blow, staying toe to toe with Oregon the entire time if you want a shot to win. So while definitely what I saw in the second half was promising, I'm still a little concerned that the Trojans could start a little slow. And if they do turn it on the second half, it could just be too little too late.
Yeah, they went on the road to Illinois and started off that game with an early fumble from Wayman Jordan. They went to Notre Dame and actually had a chance to get off to a kind of a fast start and had their issues there, which stopped them in their tracks. But yeah, you cannot go to Eugene, Oregon with the way that crowd is going to be, just nuts. It's going to be wacko up there in a good way. I mean, those fans are support that football team as well as any in the country. So yeah, they get off to a slow start there. That momentum is going to be felt a little bit harder, and to come back in a game like that, because you're not going to go up to Eugene, Oregon, and chances are really low you're going to be able to shut out the Ducks in the second half like you have been able to do semi with Northwestern and Iowa. But that win, nevertheless, at Iowa against Iowa was huge. But yeah, let's just expand upon Mekhi Lemon. Mekhi's a kid that I've known since he was a ninth grader at Los Alamitos. He's always been a guy where I viewed him a little bit uniquely as this dog. He's wired differently mentally than most of the kids that play high school football. So what we've seen from him, has not been a surprise, but this particular game, I just kept waiting for the ball to come out, right? He's just getting up in the air. And it's not that I was thinking he wasn't going to catch the ball, but man, weren't you surprised on some of those, the way he came down, that he was able to hold on to the football?
Absolutely. And I mean, but that's what makes him so great is that he's able to beat out guys, hold on to the football on the way down, or even and just really, make sure he just doesn't fumble or doesn't lose control of it on the way down. Is able to secure those completions. It's really impressive. The other
Yeah.
thing that really impresses me is just once he gets by you, you're not catching him. Like I've been joking all week on the different shows I've been on. Like once he passes you, just give up. Like don't even waste your energy chasing him. You're not gonna get him. Like I know this is probably the most common used comparison he gets, but he's like Sonic the Hedgehog. Just once he's by you, he is gone. His strength, his speed, his ability to jump up and get the balls and hold on them, but then just all around game is just so impressive. He's just such a fun receiver to watch out there on the gridiron, and that's very much why he's named a semifinalist for the Bolitnikoff Award on Monday.
Yeah. If he does, I mean, he's going to have to. Yeah, he finishes the year with some strong performances. It's just hard for me to imagine anybody beating him up for that award. But you know, the voters will have their say on that. But also some other performances that I think is worth noting. Um, now USC before the season even started and heading into some of the earlier games, there was a lot of concerns that Prophet Brown was out for the year and Chasen Johnson was out for the year. And Alex Graham was expected to be a starter also early in the season, and he was out. So, there's been times where they've really had to have some younger guys step up. And in this last game, first quarter, Kamari Ramsey goes out, and then Bishop Fitzgerald is walking into the locker room at halftime. So USC is essentially down four because Alex Graham is back, so he did play in this last game. But what they've been able to do with the secondary, I mean, it could have been devastating with the injuries they've suffered this year. And they've just managed to kind of make it work with the offensive line, the makeshift offensive line. So tip of the cap to the coaches on what they've done. Zach Hansen, my goodness, what he's been able to do with his guys. So yeah, it's just I think when Riley talks about a culture win, I do think you hear the feedback from the players. And culture is a word that people throw around all the time, but when you're watching these teams be able to deal with as much adversity as USC is, and there's other teams too. This is the end of the season issues, but the teams that keep winning are the teams that really are built a little bit different and have a little bit more maybe depth than others. But just talk about what has surprised you the most through 10 games in a positive way.
I think what surprised me most is just how some of these units or position groups are able to maintain their high levels of production despite the injuries. And my favorite example, I've probably brought it up here, is the offensive line.
Yeah.
Especially, I think that's just what Zach Hansen coming in, moving over from tight ends and taking over that group. What he's done is phenomenal. Elijah Page is out again, and they've just had everyone else has come in. Killian O'Connor goes down. John Reed fills in. Then Reed goes down, and O'Connor comes back. And
Yeah.
then Kalen Miller, King Miller's brother, is filling in. Just all these different guys, no matter what seems to happen, it's really impressive because of how well there's all these guys seem to be gelling, even if they don't necessarily get all these reps together. Because that's been an issue, it seems like, in the past for USC's offensive lines, is they've just struggled. The starters have struggled to gel. So then when even one of them goes down, the whole unit's just
Yeah.
kind of done for the year. And I think we saw that a few times. And I mean, when I interviewed Justin Dedich back in I think it was in February, I asked him about that, especially from that 2023 team where they kind of were struggling to gel and it put a lot of pressure on Caleb Williams. And he would fully agreed with just that notion that, yeah, it does take a lot of time for those offensive line to gel. It's maybe one of the hardest ones, but Zach Hansen has done a phenomenal job having his guys ready. And then also, Scott, you did bring up kind of culture and just, I think when I think about that, Riley said it was a culture win. I think it's partly because of the injuries and just how bought in everyone is on this team. And I think you really saw it on his face. Yeah, usually, I mean, Riley does obviously lose it a little bit, but mainly it's at the refs or if he's frustrated. But I think just like kind of how hyped up he was when the clock hit 3-0 at the end of the fourth quarter, that was like a different kind of hype. Like the emotion that Riley just let out there, I think just shows just how just excited he is, how much that win truly meant to him here at USC and just for what it means for just the direction of this program. I think that really, I really love that clip that I saw of him that went viral, just kind of just screaming and just being like, let's go. Like just kind of that energy. It's like, that's not typical Lincoln Riley energy, but I could get used to it. And I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. And with Lincoln Riley, and everybody has an opinion of these coaches that are higher profile guys like Lincoln Riley. But the just the takeaway that I got from his reaction is that it was genuinely a fired up for his players and his coaches. It wasn't about him. And he said at practice yesterday, after practice yesterday, that this is what I'm used to, having a shot at the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But I just know how much, I, his players, like, we're talking about the injuries and even the guys that we don't talk about at USC that are making a difference in practices, those guys don't get talked about. You could just tell with the combination of the time of year, the opponent they were playing, the weather conditions, the talk about USC being soft and not being able to beat another Big Ten team like an Iowa at their own game and maybe a mud bowl. It just all came together, and you could see how much that meant to him. And yes, I agree. It was great to see that type of reaction from your head football coach. When games like that matter I've heard some feedback and read some feedback. Lincoln Riley, coach like Riley at USC should never get that excited over a victory over Iowa. Well, that's kind of disrespecting Iowa. Iowa's a team that's lost 4 games by 15 total points. Okay, they lost at Iowa State. They lost to Indiana. They lost to USC, and did they lose
They
to
lost to Oregon.
Oregon? So, we're talking about it. Yeah, they lost 18-16 in the last seconds to Oregon at home in another rain game. So we're talking about this is a good football team. You can't always just look at the final record to figure out how tough of an opponent some of these Big Ten teams are. So anyway, moving on to Oregon. What are you expecting? It's supposed to be 55 and sunny, I guess, as of yesterday, up at around kickoff in Eugene. What are you thinking USC is going to face when they get up there?
I think they're going to face a team that's going to come out ready to play, especially on defense. They're going to put a lot of try to put a lot of pressure on Jaden Mayava and the offensive line. And then on offense, I think they're going to start out running, but then also they're going to try to do that to get USC off balance and allow Dante Moore to throw. But I think also there's obviously a lot of storylines, especially at the early kickoff, college game day being there. And then I think Riley's made a lot of points about just how kind of USC's kind of using sort of the disrespect that kind of he feels with game day now kind of being there more for Oregon than for USC. So I think that's going to motivate USC. And I think that just grows on an overall theme that I think, touched on at the start of the year, Scott, when we talked about USC not being ranked in either the AP or coaches polls, where USC was kind of, we were saying, it's fine if USC isn't ranked because you kind of, in some ways, it's better because you're kind of playing with that chip on your shoulder, that disrespect. It makes you play angry, and you play better when you're angry, in my opinion. That just, I think, doesn't matter what the sport is. So I think that Riley's kind of trying to use that now, saying, oh, they didn't respect us then, so why should we pay any attention to them now? Let's just go out and do our job. So I really like how he's kind of motivating his guys with what he's been saying this week.
Yeah, it's you're going up there. I don't know what they're going to get their tight end back, who's one hell of a football player. I'm not sure what we're hearing that Evan Stewart and DeCorian Moore may not be playing. I don't know. I haven't gotten the latest on that situation, but the Oregon was dealing with their own set of pretty significant injuries as well. So it's that time of year, right? You're going to have guys that are out, but it's even though USC's biggest Achilles heel is stopping the run, and Oregon's got 3 guys that can come at you, and a quarterback that can run as well and make the throws. He's been pretty prolific at home as well. So USC's defensive backs are also going to have to come prepared to play in this football game. It seems encouraging that Kamari Ramsey will likely be back. We'll probably get more on that today and see what we can get anyways. USC doesn't like to give away a whole lot in the injury situation, but I'm thinking Bishop Fitzgerald is probably not going to be back the rest of the regular season. So we'll see how that turns out as well. But yeah, you go up to Oregon and it's hard for me to imagine USC going up there and winning without some luck and one of those kind of perfect games. They're going to need a little help from Oregon, maybe with some turnovers. They're going to need a great defensive scheme from Danton Lynn. And look, I think the one team that the USC and USC fans was most concerned about running over them this year was Michigan. And that was the one team to where they kind of shut down Michigan. So going on the road is a different animal. At some point, USC is going to go on the road and they're going to beat a really good football team. So why not this week?
For sure, I think that's definitely it, especially with kind of the nature of it potentially being an elimination game, Scott. I actually was
Yeah.
interviewed on Sports Chat 503 with Ryan Winter on Monday. He had me on for an interview to preview the game and talk about kind of the storylines, everything going into this game. And what I kind of took away from it talking with him is despite the Ducks only having one loss, because of where their resume stands now and kind of the lack of just juice left on the schedule after if they lose to USC, they could be done. This could essentially be an elimination game for them too in many ways. So even while it's not a guarantee, even if USC wins and or Oregon loses and they're both 9-2 heading into their season finales, it could still very much be an elimination game for the Ducks if they lose because that lack of schedule juice. And obviously it's an elimination game for USC if they lose. So I think it really is exciting that there's a storyline that whoever loses might just is very much not looking at a shot at making the CFP. So I think that's another
Yeah.
interesting storyline that's going to motivate both teams, not just USC.
Oregon's suffering, there's only one game left in the season. So, yeah, obviously there's not going to be a whole lot of juice, but they do play Washington for that final game of the year. I'm not sure where Washington may be ranked coming into that game for all we know, but
Well, if the Huskies are ranked, then obviously that's going to help them for sure.
yeah,
But right
yeah.
now they're not, and especially
there's
that
not
loss,
much juice left because there's one game left.
and
You
that
are
loss to
correct.
Wisconsin is not helping. And so far, their one opportunity at a ranked team, they
Yeah.
completely blew, and it was worse than the score says it was.
But Oregon's biggest issue is not that they have one game left; it's that they've beaten really nobody.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah. So it comes down to I think there's no question USC beats Oregon and beats UCLA. They're without question going to the playoffs. There's like zero doubt about that part. And I agree that I don't think Oregon does. If Oregon loses to USC, I don't think they do. I guess the situation will be come down to whether Michigan can beat Ohio State. Does anybody think that that's actually going to happen? I don't think we did last year, but this year it just seems really improbable.
I don't think, Scott, after what happened last year with Michigan and Ohio State, I am never counting out the Wolverines against the Buckeyes. Like, that is the one team that is Ryan Day's kryptonite. Even after the Buckeyes won the national championship, Dave Portnoy could not help himself and started trolling Ohio State. So all I'm saying is I'm not saying I would predict Michigan to win, but if the Wolverines pull off the upset, I would not be surprised.
What's crazy is last year's game was at Ohio State.
Yeah.
It's just, and there was talk about potentially firing Ryan Day. I mean, it was just like the talk was crazy that was going on about that. So, I don't foresee that being the talk regardless of win or lose this year. But, the Big Ten is if you just kind of look at the teams that USC is facing in the Big Ten, the reason the Big Ten is so competitive, though, in my opinion, is that you have these teams. They may not all have the same skill players that are of equal footing, but all those teams that USC has played, whether it's Northwestern, Illinois, whoever, Michigan, Iowa, those offensive lines and defensive lines are pretty damn solid across the board, and you do get tested. And so I think the fact that USC has maybe been a little bit tested, and we're not just talking about the opponents, we're talking about the weather aspect too. That's going to be a big deal when they get up to Eugene, Oregon this week. Don't you think that's going to make somewhat of a difference?
I think it certainly can, Scott. You definitely nailed that. I think that's definitely an important point that we can't overlook for sure.
Yep. So anyway, all right. You'll decide tonight whether you're going. I'm heading out on Friday late morning up to flying to Portland. Then Mark Culkin and I will drive from Portland to Eugene on Saturday morning to get this football game. 12:30 kickoff. Looking for what is this a game on CBS?
It's on CBS. Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, hey. We'll get with you guys after this game. We're going to have a huge recruiting weekend next weekend for the USC UCLA game. I like to go also to the game between the equipment managers as well. I think it's at USC this year, right? That stuff?
Not really, but that would make sense given that the big game is at the Coliseum this year.
Yeah. All right. We'll look forward to talking to you guys next week. I'm Scott Schrader and
I'm Crash Collier. Fight on.